He just wasn't willing to answer any questions. He kept asking the same question over and over, just different ways. He was hand wave dismissing everything. And he eventually, just stopped checking or even responding. So he basically showed, he really has no knowledge of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Sure, he's read them over a couple times, but, he doesn't have a lot of knowledge in them. But Jackson had said, oh, yeah, this guy, he may be young, but he's an expert in the Dead Sea Scrolls. I was like, oh, cool. Someone who actually understands it. Nope, didn't understand it at all. And it's just like, these people that claim to be experts in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and then you bring up something in the Dead Sea Scrolls and they dismiss it and hand wave. They're just like, oh, well, the author's commentary says this. And it's just like, you start slapping yourself in the head like, dude, do we go by author's commentary in scriptures on what verses mean? No. It's the same thing with this. We don't go by the author's insertions. We don't go by author's commentary. We take it to the original text and what it says. And it doesn't say add 7 days to keep up with the equinox that you're moving to a pagan Wednesday. Like, please show the scriptures for that. Where do we move the sign of the Tekufa to the next Wednesday that comes around? And it was just like, oh, he even tried saying we were the ones holding to a Wednesday. And he's like, I don't call it Wednesday, I call it day 4. So I was like, okay, then show me where day 4 always lines up to the pagan Wednesday. And, just more dodging. It was quite interesting. And unfortunately, that's the type of people we have to deal with. And, they say they're out for truth, but then you start showing them truth and they run away.
They're just afraid to let go of the Gregorian calendar because the whole
Yeah,
world goes on the Gregorian calendar and they're afraid to walk away from it.
yeah, exactly. And he accused us of following the Gregorian calendar because we said March 20th. And it's like, no, 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 we're not following the Gregorian at all. That just happens to be the date that it lands on the Gregorian. So yes, it's Gregorian March 20th. That doesn't mean we're following that Gregorian date. We're not following the Gregorian months or the weeks. However, on the other hand, he's trying to say day 4 is just always on a Wednesday. It's always on a Wednesday.
So it sounds like he's not going by the number, but going by the pagan Gregorian / pagan
Exactly.
names of the days of the week.
Yeah, and he's saying, oh, well, I just call it day 4. Well, if you're lining it up to a Wednesday constantly, you're still going by the Gregorian week.
Yep.
And I even asked, I was like, so if you do 364 days only, you're going to be drifting backwards a day each year until your first fruits of wheat and barley are going to be in the winter. Now, you can't have first fruits of barley and wheat in the wintertime. So what do you do to keep it stable there without doing an intercalation? He couldn't answer that. He says you have to add 7 days. And it's like, okay, well, where is this in scriptures? Not one attempt to even answer it.
Now, this was Jackson Schneider's friend that you were sharing this with?
Yeah, it was that Onius.
Oh,
Onius, or
yes. Okay.
yeah, he was on there with us.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah. Well, that's too bad.
Yeah, and so Katrina found it. Yeah. So Katrina found him on Facebook and made a group with me, him, and Marissa and Katrina.
I added Jackson later, but I don't know if he checked any.
Yeah, Jackson was added like after the first couple questions, so there was still a lot. But yeah, we added Jackson so he can see as well, and I even sent him an email saying, "Hey, you mentioned you put a lot of trust in this brother, but it seems, he's only concerned with being right rather than what is right." So, of course, it was worded better than that.
But is Jackson, did Jackson
Wait, you're
still
breaking up there
seems
a little bit,
open?
sister.
Wait, I can't hear you, Jennifer. All I heard was Jackson seems open.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, a little bit. It's a bit choppy.
Hello?
That sounds better.
Yeah, does he seem open still to studying out the calendar this way?
Yeah,
Uh,
it went well with Jackson. He said he understood it.
hang on.
He said
I'm in a very studying with us.
I didn't quite catch that.
I just
But yeah,
lost you
no,
guys. Came back. Can you hear me
he's
okay now?
open to it. Yeah, now I can
Okay,
hear
good.
you.
He's still open to it. Okay, good.
Yeah, yeah. So he sent, I guess he wanted this brother to come try and test out what we were talking about. Jackson said, he trusted him. So it's like, all right, maybe he's open to learning. And we quickly found out that is not the case at all.
Okay.
Very closed-minded, very,
That's too bad.
just, yeah, he unwilling to read anything, unwilling to reason together with scripture, unwilling to even answer any questions. And, it was really disappointing because, I was expecting someone who knew a lot about Dead Sea Scrolls, and he really didn't. He didn't bring any evidence, he didn't bring any scriptures, nothing.
Well, hopefully Jackson realized that, what he's been saying. No, he's not as well versed in the Dead Sea Scrolls like he makes himself out to be. Hopefully Jackson saw that.
Hopefully, you know, that's the thing though, is like, so we can't trust other men, and that's just an example of it. You can't send someone out and be like, oh, go test it out for me and see what's going on. Because this brother didn't test anything out. He was very closed-minded, you know, unresponsive, unwilling to even be there. And like I said, we only went back and forth for like an hour or two, and he stopped even responding or checking what was said.
Now, Jeremy, I have a question about the Dead Sea Scrolls. I can't remember if I've asked this before, so forgive me if I'm repeating a question that you've already answered.
No, no worries.
Um, so, um, the temple in Egypt, the Onias, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Are there ruins still there to this day?
Yes, actually.
Okay. So my next question is the scrolls that came out in like the late 1800s that referenced a lot of things that were also found in the Qumran caves. Could they have come from the Temple of Onias and then they separately found the Dead Sea Scrolls later?
Well, We know for sure that the caves were some kind of library for the old manuscripts, after they were rescribed, because, paper doesn't last forever. So once the scrolls would start getting worn, things like that, they would have the scribes, rescribe them word for word onto another scroll. And so the old scrolls they would put in these libraries like that. And so that's why we see all these scrolls in the caves, and just over time some of them deteriorated, and because it's paper.
Yeah, I know, but you had mentioned that there was writings that was uh, talked about in the early 1900s,
Oh yeah, yeah.
um, and the Dead Sea Scrolls
Even
hadn't been discovered yet, and yet they had some of that information. And I was just wondering if you think that they could have gotten that information from the Temple of Onias instead of the Dead Sea Scrolls.
well, another one they found in the late 1800s, early 1900s was, they said it was found in Qumran there, in that area.
Hmm.
They
And
just
didn't you
hadn't.
say, Jeremy, that they also found a lot of those scrolls even in the 1700s, even further
Yeah,
back?
exactly. Yeah, even further back they were found. And
And where
so
were they found back then?
in Qumran right there.
Okay, okay.
That's why we only have, the scraps left over, basically. Is because they took all the full scrolls back then. So, they're probably now
Yeah.
in, the Vatican's basement.
Yep. Yep. And they're full. Yep. Oh,
But yeah, they
goodness.
did also find things around the Temple of Onias and things like that. And Jackson Snyder is actually pretty well studied about the Temple of Onias, which is really cool.
Yeah, I remember him mentioning that, and so I was my interest was piqued, right? Because you had even told him that that's where Yahusha and his family had to kind of, escape to um, when he was a young boy. And when they came back, right, the Pharisees and Sadducees were amazed by his knowledge, even as a young boy, because he was directly taught from another sect of Zadoks that were there in Egypt.
Yep.
The Temple of Onias was operating at the same exact time as the Second Temple in Jerusalem. And they had fled. So originally, when the Seleucid Empire came in and they started killing the priests for not following the moon calendar, they killed Onias' father. That's when he fled to Egypt, the small group. And another small group fled to Qumran there. And that's where we got the two separate communities, but all sons of Zadok. And then we see Messiah going in, he visited both Egypt, and then he comes back, gets baptized by John the Immerser, who is the son of Zadok and the last high priest. And then he passes the priesthood on to Messiah, because Messiah is not only from David, he's from Levi as well. And so therefore he took the priesthood, and now it's part of the Melchizedek priesthood, Melchizedek, which he is king and high priest of. And that's what the Melchizedek scroll actually talks about in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And it even speaks about how Melchizedek, when Abraham met him, that was Messiah himself. So there's a lot of stuff, it goes way deep. I definitely don't have any of the answers to, but, we could see these things. And, they try to say the Temple of Onias was, oh, it's some, pagan sun worshiping temple. No, when you actually look at it, it was the true temple of the sons of Zadok. And they even admit to this in their own, historical writings about it. Because mostly what you find about it is from, the synagogue of Hasatan, and they're trying to say, oh, it was a Hellenistic temple, and, just a bunch of crazy Jews. And when in reality, we know they are the Hellenized ones. So that was not a Hellenistic temple. It was actually the true one that was working, which fulfilled Isaiah 19. The verse about the temple to Yahuah being set up in Egypt. And then the Egypt learning the ways of Yahuah. And that's exactly what happened. The Ptolemaic Empire. Maybe we should go over that, next fellowship. Go over the temple of Onias. Really good.
That sounds excellent.
Yeah, I'm interested in that.
Because I know a lot of people haven't even heard of it. And, even in our group here, not many, or even if they've heard of it, they don't know a lot about it.
I've never heard about it until you mentioned it, Jeremy. So yes, I'm very interested.
Yeah, and I think it's an important part of the history and understanding. We've already had 3 temples here. There was
Yes.
two. There was 2 that were legitimate, and one that was a defiled one that happened to be in Jerusalem. They also had a temple at Qumran as well. So they had these altars and things set up that were truly to Yahuwah outside of Israel, outside of Jerusalem. And technically, Qumran is outside of Israel, and it was back then because it was called the wilderness. So again, what does that prove? Well, it proves we can observe the festivals outside of the land because they were doing it outside of the land. So just more proof the festivals are not abolished. They're not something we're not to do. We're always supposed to do them. Otherwise, why would Messiah say, observe Passover in remembrance of him if we weren't able to observe it?
Praise Yah.
Yeah. All praise to the Most High.
Jeremy, where were the 2 legitimate temples, right? Solomon and
Solomon,
what's the other one?
Egypt, the Temple of Onias.
So the Temple
was
of Onias.
Yeah, that was the fulfillment of Isaiah 19, verse 20 and on. But there it's going to speak about how there's a temple that will be erected in Mitzrayim or Egypt to Yahuwah. And then the people of Egypt will start following Yahuwah. And then Assyria and all these other nations are going to start following Yahuwah. And then he goes on to say how Israel is like his chosen. Egypt is because it describes Israel, Egypt, and Assyria, and how all 3 of them are actually by Yahuwah for a certain person. I have to go back to Isaiah 19.
Jeremy, I can barely hear you.
Oh, sorry. Might be my phone overheating.
Uh-oh, I can hear you now. I just couldn't therefore. Okay.
Oh, but yeah. So Isaiah 20 and beyond that, it's going to speak about that. The temple set up in Egypt to Yahuwah. And then Egypt starts following Yahuwah, which causes Assyria to start following Yahuwah.
And this was the Temple of Onias?
Yep.
Onias
is actually...
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, you might have just going to answer this. I mean, not that I've studied it very deeply, but so that would be before or after David and Solomon's temple?
Oh, it was the same time as the second temple.
Oh,
Yeah,
So
so
Herod,
after.
yeah, after.
okay. So after that was
So
the. I've
it was,
never
it
known
was the,
that.
yeah, it's the temple of Onias in Egypt, and he was given land, and they called it the land of Onias. It was, they call it Heliopolis today, which means land of the sun. But why was it land of the sun? Because the sons of Zadok followed the solar calendar. Also, at that time, that's when Egypt went from a moon calendar to a solar calendar. It's also, which only lasted a very short time, but still. And it's also when the Septuagint was translated from Hebrew to Greek, because Ptolemy was in control, like Egypt was his empire. So that's when Ptolemy started following the way. That's when the rest of Egypt started following the way. That's where we get our Septuagint, all these things. And, it's very hidden because they don't want us to make that connection. They don't want us knowing, hey, look, Messiah, why did he go to Egypt to escape Herod? Well, because that's where the land of Onias was, the temple of Onias, the true temple. So he went there, learned from the sons of Zadok, which is why when he came back, everyone was astonished about how much he knew. Then he goes to the other Zadok community at Qumran, where John the baptizer is a leader of, and he gets immersed by him, literally at Qumran. And then the connections with, Paul as well on the road to Damascus. Damascus where? Syria? No. There's Damascus, Qumran, right there.
Well, and I had a thought. So since we know that Elizabeth and Mary, right, conversed with each other while they were both pregnant, do you think it was Elizabeth that gave uh, Joseph and Mary like the advice to go to the temple there in Egypt, to go escape there?
Yeah. That could be, honestly. Like, hey, these sons of Zadok are here. Yeah, no, you got it there, Katrina. That's it. Yeah, Book of Isaiah and the Temple of Onias. So it's Isaiah 19, 18 through 22. So that's where it's speaking about uh, the temple erected to Yahuah in Egypt. And then here in the Lexham Septuagint, it calls it the city of Azadek. Whereas in the King James, they call it the city of destruction or the city of the sun in some translations. But Azadek means it's another transliteration of Zadok. So it's called City of Zadok. Yeah, and Heliopolis or the land of Onias, right there. Strategic location. And Onias is Greek for Yochanan. So not only was Yochanan or John the baptizer named after the last high priest, he was the high priest as well. And he was Elijah, the spirit of Elijah. So there's all these connections they don't want you knowing about. This is why they don't even mention the Temple of Onias. This is why people haven't heard of it. They don't know what it is. And because they mislabel it as, the city of destruction or Heliopolis, things like that, nobody really looks into it. Because they're just like, makes you think, oh, well, that's just a pagan city. Why bother? But yeah, no, we'll definitely have to go over that in our next fellowship. Yep, there's the, yeah, I have all these links on my article as well. speaking about it. Yeah, and they try to say the Temple of Onias was Hellenistic and this and that. But that's just not true at all. And it does not line up with the history either. Because we see the Hellenistic ones were the Pharisees and Sadducees. Yeah, thanks for sharing, Katrina. Awesome.
Yeah, just sharing my notes. Copy it down, paste it for yourself. Know this stuff. It's important for sure.
Was it about the same size as the one in Qumran, or did you say the one in Qumran was smaller?
Well, the one in Qumran was smaller. This one was smaller than the one in Jerusalem, but let me see if I can find a link to it as well, where it shows pictures of it.
I have a question because I know earlier we were talking about that post about we don't have to keep the feasts in the temple, and actually the other day I was looking up all these verses that were in Acts about saying when they on the Sabbath they went to the temple and they preached, and the Gentiles wanted to go on the next Sabbath to hear them preach more of the word. But how do we know if, well, we don't know if they were in a temple, I guess, that if they were going to a temple for the feast, would they be going to temples in Jerusalem or the temple in Qumran, the apostles after Messiah uh, ascended? Do we know?
I believe they were going to the one in Qumran, and that's the one I believe Messiah was going to as well.
Okay,
Not the
yeah,
one in Jerusalem.
right.
But there's completely about the land of Onias. That I know there's one that shows the pictures. Let's see. And of course, they call it Hellenistic, but we know the truth about that. Where is
Sorry, what does that word mean, Hellenistic?
it? Those are the usurpers.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
So here's a picture or an artist renditioning of it. Hold on one sec. So there's like an artist rendering of it, Temple of Onias. The ruins that remain of it now. Sorry, my phone's being super slow because it's like really hot. One second. Here's an article in French about it. I don't think that's going to help unless you can read French.
So I have another question now. When Messiah was crucified, and they say that the veil was torn.
Yeah.
So, and the earth quaked and the veil was torn. Do you think that veil was in multiple temples and the
No,
temple in Jerusalem?
I think that was the one in Jerusalem because that's the one where, it was defiled.
Right.
That's a good question.
Yeah, because I'm wondering if he wasn't in there, right? Yahuah, when the priest could only go in at certain times, or they had to go in. Maybe I'm
Yeah.
that veil being torn in the temple. We're calling it not the real temple. I don't know. Just question came to my mind thinking about that.
Yeah, and I think that it was that veil in the temple in Jerusalem because, that's what the Pharisees and Sadducees used to hide behind. And it wasn't the true temple. And that's what the War Scroll is actually about is, how the sons of Zadok went, they all took up swords and they actually went and took down that temple in Jerusalem themselves because it was defiled.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was Rome.
Yeah, Rome helped them out, yes, but
Oh,
that's what they don't want you to know either. It's the sons of Zadok, the sons of light,
interesting.
versus the sons of darkness, who were the Pharisees and Sadducees. And they don't want us knowing these things because they don't want us to know these events have already been played out, which is, again, part of the deception to our timeline where we're at. Also, post-millennial reign or Satan's little season.
Right.
It's, like I said before, it's a spider web of lies and deception with Satan at the center, all to hide Yahuwah. They all connect for a reason. And it's to get people thinking, oh, that's such a big deception. How can that be perpetuated? Well, when you have all these little compartmentalized areas of deception that all connect back to it, it's pretty easy. Yeah, I just shared some more about, Onias as well. So it's going to show Onias and his father and his grandfather, all the way down to Onias the fourth, which is the one, after Onias the third was killed for not following the Seleucid Empire Babylonian moon calendar. That's where his son Onias the fourth, he fled to Egypt, set up the temple. That's where other priests also went to Qumran at that same time. I do have it in my article as well. Probably not in as much
All right.
detail as we.
So
Oh, go
I'm
ahead.
in and out of this conversation. So the Temple of Onias was erected by the Zadok priests. When? When they were kicked out of the temple? After they were
Yeah,
kicked out of the second temple?
yeah, after the usurpation, yes, correct.
And they set that up in Egypt?
And it was operating the same time as the second temple in Jerusalem.
But the second temple was defiled, though, because they were
Yeah,
out of
correct.
it. Okay.
Yeah, in Jerusalem. Yeah.
So they went and erected it somewhere else. That's funny. Good for them. Good for them.
Yeah, and it happened to fulfill Isaiah 19.
Awesome. So then, all right, so that happened. Now, and then they also had a temple at Qumran. So when the time of Messiah, that was the time of the second temple, right?
Exactly.
So he was kind of going around. I mean, was he ever really seen, like, in the temple? Or, like, was he, like, acknowledging that temple was defiled in any way? Or maybe hinting or alluding to? Because if he was doing things, he was going to the temple in, by Qumran, or the temple. So which one was the temple kind of working?
Yeah,
Which
so
temple was working?
they were all working. It's just the one in Jerusalem was defiled. That's why we see him. He's going to the temple courtyard, things like that. He never actually enters into the temple because it's defiled.
Whoa.
And
So,
that's why we see him. We
Except for
see
when
him.
they had him on trial, right?
No, that wasn't the temple. That was like some kind of courtroom or
Oh,
place
okay.
where they had judges.
Sorry. Yep, disregard what I said then.
And but yeah, no, he never enters into the actual temple in Jerusalem. Why? Because it's defiled. That's why he's only going into the courtyard and things like that. And then
And that's when
when
he turned over the money changers' tables
yeah,
and all of
yeah,
that. Yeah.
So
exactly.
when Yahusha got, because wait,
I'm confused
so
then.
Mary,
So he came into the defiled temple and he was yelling at the people?
Go into the temple. The courtyard is not in
Wait, I
entering
can't
the
hear you.
the
I
courtyard
want to
is
hear
not
this.
the courtyard is not entering the temple. He never actually entered inside the Holy of Holies or inside the temple room of the temple in Jerusalem. We don't see any of that. All we see is him going into the courtyard or on Solomon's porch, not actually going into the temple itself. The only times we see him there in the courtyard is when he's flipping tables or, he's actually teaching the truth. Pharisees come up and try to, do their Pharisee trap questions. But he's not actually inside the temple. He doesn't enter it. None of these things.
so do we think that Mary and Joseph went to the temple there in Qumran when they dedicated Yahusha?
I'm pretty sure they would have. Absolutely. That's probably where they learned to, hey, the temple of Onias in Egypt, that's probably a good place to flee when you run from Herod. Of course, they hide this so much, it's really hard to put together. And it's mostly just speculation because that's all we have right now. But just putting facts together, we see he went to the temple of Onias, then he goes to Qumran, where they also had a temple. And the only times we see him at the temple in Jerusalem is when he's flipping over tables or he's preaching against like what the Pharisees are teaching. He's never actually entering into it, things like that. He's around it because that's where everybody was at. It's like, hey, look, this is the truth. If you want the truth, listen to me. Don't follow this, defiled people in this defiled temple. It's been usurped. This is why we see Paul in there, talking about the sect they call away. It's because that's what they called them, or that's what they called themselves in Qumran. They said followers of the way. And we see when we read the Dead Sea Scrolls that they were all about separating from these Pharisees and Sadducees. And that's where we even read, we brought it up earlier, the apocalypse of Elijah. And that's where he's even speaking about the same things in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And then he says, don't even go to these people who aren't interested at all. Like if they're not willing to listen, don't even waste your breath on them. So that's what we see, exactly what was being upheld at Qumran as well. Don't even waste your breath going to these people because they're not going to listen to you. And
Just like he
ironically,
tells us to do today.
yep,
Share.
precisely.
And if they're only there to headbutt you and not have an open heart to look into it, then dust your feet and walk away and keep them in prayer.
And that's it. Because there are these people who, you can tell them till you're blue in the face, they're not gonna listen or read or pay attention to anything you have to say. And it's like that saying, you can lead a horse to the water, but you can't make him drink. Same thing. We can share the truth with these people, but we can't make them accept it. They have to do these things on their own, especially the ones who, they only care about being right.
Just like the person you guys tried sharing some of these nuggets of truth with, that Jackson referred you to. And you guys did what you were supposed to do. And since he refuses to listen, dust your feet, pray for him, and move on.
Yep. That's all we can do. And hopefully, when this resurfaces, he'll remember, like, oh, hey, these are what those other guys were trying to tell me. Maybe I should look into it.
Yep, seeds planted.
And really, that's why I was asking the questions I did, was to get them to think, like, hey, this isn't found in scriptures. Maybe they got a point. Maybe I should look into this. Get the gears turning to make them, like, dive into it themselves. But, all we can do is pray sometimes.
So I'm so back and forth with this girl, and I'm just using this as a, learning tool so that we could all be on the same page. I told her, look at the Hebrew. It's not new, it's renewed, Kodesh. Same covenant, same laws. The only difference is the heart change. And she said the only difference was a heart change. So then, dear friend, where is the temple, the priest, the animal sacrifices? By all means, travel to the temple to keep the next feast according to the calendar you trust.
Again, she's not realizing the true temple and tabernacle and priesthood is being kept by Messiah in heaven. Everything all around those laws about the priests, for priests, still apply to us today. So she
But we're
keeps
not
trying to say,
priests.
yeah, we're not.
Yeah.
That's why I said everything around those priest laws still apply today. Meaning, if it says the priests do this and this and that, those don't apply to us because we're not priests. Everything
Yeah, and
else
it was,
around that. Oh, go ahead.
sorry, it was the priests that were in charge of doing the sacrifices for the people. So yeah, we don't have animals to bring to priests anymore to atone, or give for sin offerings, because you couldn't just go and get an animal and sacrifice it yourself and give that to Yah as their sin offering or atonement. Those were the priest's job, and yeah, they're not here anymore for us to give to.
Yeah, and does she forget Messiah was the final sacrifice atonement offering for that?
Exactly.
So what okay. Because I know she's trying to trap me here, and she's making me dodge because she's not acknowledging the fact that it's renewed, not new. But
Yeah.
so we don't have a physical temple.
Actually, we do. Our bodies are his temple, and his name
I
is
was
on our
just going to
forehead.
say that. And his spirit dwells in us. Whoop.
I would just say who's using a chat GPT to come up with responses?
Yeah. Go ask
You
your
know,
chat GPT. Yeah.
can you give me a response from your actual thoughts and opinion, not chat GPT's?
So I'm getting confused. Who is this person that's using chat GP? Who is it? Is it someone that has their own ministry or what?
Katrina knows her. Who is it, Katrina?
Yeah. It's someone that's like a expert on Satan's Little Season. That when I started that group in private message, she came in with like, oh yeah, we don't need to do the Sabbaths anymore because Messiah said we only have to do 5 of the 10 commandments or something like that. I don't know. She's twisting the law.
But he says if we transgress in one area of the law, we're guilty of them all because they're all intertwined. The law points out what sin is. That's what people have got to realize, that his moral law is what points out sin. It can't save us, but it's a gauge to see where we're at.
Even pointed that out. You know, what is sin? Well, it's defined by John
It's
himself.
transgression of his law. What law? His 10 commandments, his holy law.
Yeah.
That governs heaven, that governs everything.
His commandments are literally chapter headings for the entirety of the law.
Holy.
So I could say we are the temple and the Ruach is within us. We do the feast where we are. We have the heart that the ones in the past didn't.
And the altar is in your heart. So like if you wanted to quit smoking, you would put that on the altar of your heart and you would let the Father take that from you.
And the thing is, someone had come to me. This was when I was going to, Parable of the Vineyard Feast. And I don't remember what tribe I was at, but just kind of discussing things. And I mentioned about, our bodies being now the temple, where his spirit resides. And she goes, oh, really? So where would you say the most holy place is? And I said, well, it's the mind. It's the heart and the mind of the person. That's how Yah talks to us.
The pineal gland, obviously.
Yes, that's where the most holy place is. That's where Yah meets with us. That's why the enemy cannot penetrate our minds.
That's why they're trying to calcify it with the what's that stuff they put in the water? I mean, the
fluoride.
Yes, fluoride. Yes, it's that fluoride stare, y'all. It's that fluoride stare.
Fluoride and a bunch of other stuff to calcify the I can never say it correctly. Pineal gland, whatever. I can never pronounce it right. Excuse me. But I mean, that's what he's after. That's what our Heavenly Father, that's where he resides. And that's why they say they're trying to destroy the God gene. It's the pineal
and
gland.
if you go by that chakra thing, the pineal gland is literally the last one to light up.
And they also call it the third eye. I think that's another name for the New Agers, is the third eye, whatever.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's where we hear his voice. So obviously it's the Holy of Holies is in the center of our minds and where our minds are at, what we're focusing on.
Mm-hmm. And it says the heart and the mind are both interchangeable. It means the same thing. Whatever a man thinketh, so is he. Or out of the abundance of the heart, referring to the mind, the mouth speaks.
Yeah, thanks for sharing those verses, Jermaine.
Yeah, so we are the temple and his Ruach is within us. We do the feast where we are. We now have the heart that the ones in the past didn't. Our high priest is Messiah, the one who came and showed us how to keep the Torah. All the laws, the feasts, and Sabbaths are still how we are to love Yahuah and our neighbor. Messiah didn't take away anything from the law. There is no old and new covenant separation.
And in Scripture, every time you see them build an altar in the Old Testament, they would just like throw one up, every now and again in the desert. And Yahusha said, it's wherever I choose to put my name. Or it might have been, I don't know where I read that. It might be the Old Testament. But the Father says, wherever I choose to put my name. It's not a specific location. It's where his people are.
He'll write his name or law upon our hearts. Praise Yah.
Yeah, and that veil being torn is a representation that there's no longer there's like the high priest was the only one allowed in the Holy of Holies place. And now we can converse with Yah, one-on-one, with ourselves, converse with him instead of having that high priest go into the most holy place for atonement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, wait. Jermaine shared?
A whole bunch.
Fabulous. Boom. Thank you.
Yeah, well, people who let Chat GPT run their lives and their answers probably really aren't following Yahuah, unfortunately. And that makes you think, does she actually have all this knowledge about the little season, or is that from Chat GPT as well?
Yeah.
I just don't understand why people would even turn to that to trust it. I don't get it. All part of the deception.
Exactly. I don't even want to touch it. That's the thing.
Yeah, I never have, and I never will.
Yeah.
You're playing with the devil.
And she's over here getting all her responses from Chat GPT. So yeah, it's not Yahuwah's Ruach guiding her. It's the Ruach of Chat GPT guiding her.
The beast system.
Yep. Exactly. So if she's going to rely on, AI to, put together her responses for her, that's leaning on, Antichrist understanding, especially to say the Torah is done away with. Festivals are done away with. We don't got to do them. Yeah, no, none of that is true.
Lean upon the arm of flesh of man. Very, very, very dangerous.
It really is, truly. I'd like to know what she thinks about the verse in Revelation that talks about how the ones who follow the commandments, that's who the dragon is wroth with and goes after. Well, the ones who follow the commandments, meaning the law, meaning, yeah, there's more than 5.
I saw that conversation, Katrina. Yeah, she was getting very confrontative.
She's ridiculous.
Yeah, I thought, oh boy. I wanted to jump in, but I hate getting entangled anymore. It just, I don't know. It seems like there is such a veil over people. It really is heart-wrenching.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, you're definitely starting to see a little more the difference between the true fruit or the wheat and the tares. You're definitely starting to see it now.
Yeah.
It's exhausting.
And what's so sad is they are our brethren, but there is such a veil over their eyes and their ears, and it seems to be anchored in place with pride and arrogance.
Yeah, pride is always an underlining factor.
Rather than a desire to learn. I mean, all of us think what we believe right now at this moment we think is right, and I hope it is. But what I've seen with this group is everybody's willing to be wrong so that we can get it right.
Hallelujah.
the Ruach may show us something entirely new tomorrow that will dismantle what we believe today, and we have to be willing to go with that. And that's part of our journey. That's part of our journey. And we'll be learning all the way up until we get to those gates of the city.
Yeah,
Yes.
aren't they the deaf, the blind, and the captives that we're supposed to be setting free? And how do you do that when they're beating you over the head with don't keep Torah? You know, that's my problem.
Yeah. I guess where I'm at is instead of arguing with people, if I see that block, I just back off and think, okay, I'm going to add this to my list of people I'm going to intercede for, because the
Right.
scripture tells us to intercede for them, to snatch them out of the fire, to intercede for them because they are blinded by the God of this world. And even though they're a believer, maybe a Christian believer or even a Torah follower, it's like those spirits are still affecting people. And we have to be so careful every day that they don't affect us. We have to
That's
put on
what
the
we
armor
call,
every day. Yeah.
and they're going to
We
be
have,
called the least in the kingdom of heaven. That's what Scripture says. And how can they argue with that when it so clearly says that those who break Torah and teach people to not obey Torah are going to be called the least in the kingdom of heaven?
yeah.
I don't know. I'm out here trying to set captives free, and they're beating me over the head with a baseball bat. You know, that's what it feels like. And I'm just like, how do you not see? You know, what do we have to do? What more do we have to do?
And that's
Well, just keep interceding for them so that, when we share with them, it may only be a seed that we're planting, and someone else will come along and water that seed. We may not even see it come to fruition. But
Right.
if we can plant
True,
seeds,
true, sister, true.
yeah, if we can plant seeds, we have to keep that in mind and not take things personally, because it is really
Mm-hmm.
hard not to. When you're
Mm-hmm.
getting beat up and vilified and being called a moron or a heretic or a liar or whatever, it's hard not to take it personally. But,
We're being
you
told we're
know,
blaspheming the Ruach because we're
yeah,
keeping the Torah.
yeah, exactly. It's tough, and you're just trying to love them. You're just loving them, and you get so beat up. So we just have to be like seasoned soldiers, with the armor on, so that when those arrows and darts fly, they just get knocked off by the armor. you know
Very well said, sister.
And
um
this guy's coming in to answer your question about the luminaries. Our year is established from the star Aviv, Exodus 12:2. The month shall be the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Deuteronomy 16. Guard the month of Aviv and keep the Pesach unto Yahuah. For in the month of Aviv brought you forth by Mitzrayim by night. Then dark moon is the start of the month. Ugh.
no, no book, line, and chapter of someone citing a moon for anything.
Oh my gosh.
What do they use the sun and stars
and-
for?
So they're saying for days.
Yeah, no, that doesn't work because the moon falls short. We don't see we don't see anybody citing any moon for anything at all. We don't see Yarok is for Kodesh. We don't see that at all. You know, the sun is the great sign, and the stars are the witness to that. And that's the whole thing. People want to toss out the sun and the stars and use the moon only. Or they're like, oh, well, those are for days. Okay, well, how? Explain how then. They can't.
When you see the star of Abib in the hand of Virgo, grain of wheat, then follow the dark moon as the start of the Israelite New Year. The sun
Where
is what we use to count the days of the year, 364. Genesis 1:16, the sun rules the day.
so where book, line, and chapter that we use Aviv and then a dark moon to start. Where is that? Where is that described in
When you see
detail
the
in
star
Scripture?
of Aviv, the hand of
Yeah,
Virgo,
where is all that described in detail? That's what we're looking for to start our year. Because we don't see that. We don't see any mention of that starting our year or a moon starting our year. We do see that Aviv is a witness to when Passover begins. Or sorry, not Aviv, the barley star Spica rises over the horizon on the day of Passover. What do they do about Jubilees 2:9?
oh, he's going with Psalms 81.
Oh boy, that's not about. Oh boy, I have that in my article too. It's actually about the 4 seasons.
Well,
Because that's the sign that we look for in Enoch when it's setting opposite, rising and setting opposite the sun as a full moon in the same gate.
yeah. I'm bringing in all the scriptures.
The 13th month. And that's the thing. So where's the 13th month in Scripture? Where's the intercalation in Scripture? Where's any of that in Scripture?
It's not. It's not anywhere. They make things up.
Exactly.
It's not. It's awful.
And we just asked them the same questions we asked the other Zadok people. Where's intercalation in Scripture? Where? But then that goes back to, are these people actually willing to listen? And is it
Nope.
worth taking the time to go back and forth with for days?
Well, it's, I don't feel like I've ever spoken to him on these matters. So, and it's under my post, my pinned one. So, I'd rather just have all the information under his comment. If he continues to keep, dismissing it, oh, I have the proof right there. So, it's not
Yep.
just for him, it's for the other people reading. I'm just kind of putting out all the information for, if it is not for him, then it's going to be for someone Someone else.
Yeah, that's why, the history is very important to understand. And once you understand the history, then you know where the information and the facts lie. Versus, the Pharisees and their, interpretation or what they feed us as history. Because they're the ones that changed everything to make themselves look as they're part of the lineage when they're not. They want everybody to think they're Yah's chosen people when they're not. They want everybody to think, they're following Torah and they don't. But yeah, the history, the calendar, the festivals, the Torah, all very important foundational issues. And none of them should be brushed off. The calendar is important because it keeps the festivals on time. So if Yahuah has appointed meetings and specific times, if we don't make these specific times, we're going to miss it. It goes with Torah as well. It's written in the Torah that we are to observe these festivals and all these statutes and commands. Very important. Understanding Messiah came to renew the covenant under the Melchizedek priesthood as our king and high priest. That's very important as well. And if you're missing something out of any of these areas, you're going to be off. There's too many people, the calendar's not important. Well, actually it is. If your big meeting at work is important, then Yahuwah's meetings are more important. If you don't even have the 7th-day Sabbath correct, everything else is going to be thrown off. That's the 4th command, to keep the Sabbath. And it's because of
I have
all
a friend. Oh,
Ooh.
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No,
Sorry.
go ahead.
Okay. I have a friend, a dear friend, who used to always keep the Sabbath and the feasts. He loves the Father. He loves Yahushua, but he started listening to other people about, we can't keep the proper Sabbath or the feast anymore today. He bases that on the 1st and the 6th chapter of Jubilees. He says, it says right there, we'll go astray, blah, blah, blah. And, I've gone back and forth about this so many times with him. And he says, well, since the end of the millennial reign, he says there was no good people left. And he says they did not have the correct calendar. They didn't have the correct calculations. He says we cannot keep it today. And he says, and then he gets into the sun and the moon, that it's fake, and that what we're following, we don't even know if it's true. And so his whole premise is not trying to get out of it. He is so concerned about following the wrong day, because the wrong day, the false Sabbath, the false feasts are an abomination. The scripture talks about an abominable day. They will keep an abominable day as my day. And so that's his big concern. I have not been able to break through on that. And Jeremy, a few weeks ago, I think you had said something to me about, the luminary, that those are Yah's and no one can touch it. And he said, yeah, no one can touch the sun or the moon, but they can cover them up. I just can't really get through reason, and it makes me really sad because he really does want to do what's right. How would you address that? Jeremy, you had made that statement, and I'm really trying to find some backing for that because I think that would really, um, uh, give some scriptural proof because that's the standard we go by. And that's the standard he goes by too. And I think the verses in Jubilees 1 and 6 that he's basing all this on, I mean, I told him, I says, you and I have a completely different interpretation of that. We're reading the same scripture, but getting different understanding of it. So as far as the sun and the moon goes, when you feel that, no one, those are yahs, no one can touch them. What is there anything we can go on with that scripturally? I would love something and some help in this area.
All over Enoch, actually, it speaks about how the sun and the stars, these things are going to keep track of these things forever until eternity.
Okay.
I don't remember which verses. I know it's in my article
Okay.
and my write-up, but it's speaking about the luminaries are going to keep track of these things forever.
Okay. I guess we just need to dig back into the luminaries in Enoch.
And Satan, he was given authority over the earthly things. The sun, moon, and stars are heavenly. He cannot cover them up no matter how much he tries, because he has no authority to cover them up. Sure, they have fake moons and fake suns and things like that, and it's to put people on that path that, oh, look, the sun and the stars are all fake, so what can we trust? No, go back and read Enoch. It says these things are going to keep track forever of these things. Never does it say they're going to be covered up. Never does it say, oh, don't trust it. Never does it say Satan was given authority over them.
Okay.
Because the luminaries are angels themselves. They're not fallen. They're still in heaven, doing as Yahuah ordered them to. Satan, he can try to cover them up, but what's he going to cover it up with? Clouds? Well, clouds only last so long. So
Okay.
there's nothing Satan can do to have power over anything in the heavens.
Right, because he thinks to change. He thinks to change times and laws.
Oh.
And also Jubilees and speaking about those who follow the moon, they're going to be off on these things. So while yes, that is true, they are going to be off. They're going to make an abominable day a holy day. But when we read Ezekiel 44 and we see the sons of Zadok given authority by Yahuah himself to keep the calendar and settle disputes about it, we go to the Dead Sea Scrolls and read their calendar, which they have written down, and it matches up perfectly. So the whole excuse of, oh, the calendar's lost, it'll never be found, it's from Satan himself. That's what he wants people to think. All you have to do is read what's in the writings of the sons of Zadok, the very ones ordained by Yahuah. And guess what? We have the right calendar. And then we see the witnesses in the heavens are lining up with this. Just how it should be. And so with all of that taken into account, we can say, look, we got the right calendar. We're following the appointed time. We see Paul was observing these festivals outside the land. We see the sons of Zadok themselves were observing these festivals outside the land. All of these things, none of them point to, oh, don't worry about doing these anymore. None of that. They're actually commanded in the Torah itself to keep these things forever, wherever Yahuah chooses. So our bodies are the temple, and if his name isn't written on our hearts and in our minds, then you got a more serious problem than just keeping the festivals. Because when his name is on our hearts and on our minds, he's going to dwell inside of us. And then where two or more are gathered, he's going to be there. So if two or more are gathered for the festivals, he's going to be there. So that's going to be a place where he chooses, where his people are, because they are marked forever of his people. So to say otherwise is literally going against the commandments. And to say, oh, the sun, the moon, and the stars, we can't trust those. Well, where's the book, line, and chapter of that? It doesn't exist.
That's a very good point. Very good point.
Yeah, because they're just listening to fear-mongering from men. Like, oh, look, they got fake suns. That means they're using a fake sun. No, it doesn't. Show me in scriptures where it says you cannot trust the sun anymore.
Very good point.
Yep.
Very good point. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I mean, I'm pretty solid with that, but I just really want to be able to explain this to others because it's a growing fad. I mean, more and more people are jumping on that. I mean, of course, we see every week new fads of lies, new talking points. It's constant. And people are falling for it. They're not using discernment.
Exactly. And it's really sad. Bathrobe Bob, the one who started the whole festivals are done away with. He sits on YouTube literally in just a bathrobe, cussing, screaming, and yelling how stupid people are for following the festivals. That's where all of that started from. Some jackass in a bathrobe cussing and yelling. Not
You know
even
something, brother?
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Anybody proclaiming a truth of our Messiah with that kind of mouth, I wouldn't be listening to them. They haven't had a whole lot of walking with him if they're doing that. And anybody that listens to that and thinks that they've found some new light, where they're getting their light from?
That's a good question. This guy's just cussing, screaming, yelling, calling people idiots and morons. And then, it just creates this false prophet following. And, people just parrot off that. And that's why you see these angry people coming. Oh, these festivals are done away with. If you don't believe me, I'll kill you. Like literally things like that. And it's really disgusting. And this is why false prophets and such, they were to be stoned, like taken outside the camp and killed. So these type of false, ideologies don't become rampant, get spread around. Unfortunately, we don't have that option today. Because I'd be the first in line to go up Bathrobe Bob and take him out. Because he started this whole movement of denying festivals. Then we got Kingdom in Context. That whole movement of, oh, go ahead, celebrate Christmas. Go ahead, celebrate Easter and Halloween. Don't worry about it.
Sickening. Sickening. And so many others. It's not only them.
Yeah.
It's terrible. It's
all
terrible how many people are doing that stuff. Ugh, it's disgusting.
Yeah. And then it just adds up, and they're like, oh, well, see, these people say it's fine to observe Christmas, and these people say that don't worry about the festival.
Yeah.
These people said the law's done away with, so yeah.
Yeah, but where in Yah's word does he say this? That's what I always ask him. I said, you're going by man's words, not Yah's.
Exactly. Yeah, thanks for sharing those videos, Lee.
Yeah, a bunch of snakes. And praise Yah, we got the scriptures on our side. All of them. Cover to cover, all of the ones in between. And we just got to stick to it. A lot of people are coming in, oh, no, you don't have to keep those things. Oh, no, calendar's not important. Well,
I think it's
Deuteronomy.
foundational. I think
Yeah,
it's foundational.
totally, Sarah. It's foundational. Without it, you can't get your Sabbath day. Thus, you
Yeah.
can't even do the first 4 commandments or the
Yep.
rest of them.
Yep.
It
You
is
know,
foundational. Yeah.
it is. So many people, and well-meaning people that think they're doing okay, say, well, it doesn't really matter. You know, he knows our heart. We're keeping a Sabbath, and even if we don't have it right, we're trying. But there is enough scripture that says, I have, where Yahuwah is saying, I abhor your feast days and your Sabbaths. You're trying to make, turn something that's abominable into something holy. We need to have those verses handy so we can come right back and say, no, this is what the word says, and let that word ruminate in them. Because we can't always get through to them, but you know what? The word is a sharp two-edged sword. And it's the very word of the Most High. So
Yeah, but sometimes people disregard the word in itself, too.
yeah.
Certain scriptures. So, it's like cognitive dissonance. They only want to see what their eyes want to see.
I've been in and out quite a few times today because I keep getting calls and people are talking to me about the calendar. So just continue keeping me in your prayers, eh?
Woo-hoo! Yeah, people are really hungry for it, Ellie. It is a big deal. And once you start pointing out those big things, those big talking points, whether it be, okay, well, where is the moon sighted for months? How is the moon going to work in his cycle? When his cycle is 364 days, right? That's a perfect 52 7-day week, beautiful calendar. The moon has 354. Is that divisible by 7? I don't know. But
when you're talking to people who do the lunar Sabbath, they don't expect it to be divisible by 7 because they have the new moon day between and stuff like that. So I just have to ask the Father for wisdom to know how to deal with each person where they're coming from,
So how do you do it then with them?
Well, I was introducing, I just go with how the Spirit leads because different people are at different places. Explaining the Hodesh, first time it was used was with Noah, and that it's 150 days of 30 days per month because it's from the 17th day of the second month to the 17th day of the 7th month, and it says it's 5 months. And that doesn't work with what we've got today.
I am so sorry. You know what? I wanna record you saying that so I could write that all out. Could you start again? Sorry.
Oh my. Okay. I start with where Hodesh is used for the first time in Genesis. And that's during the time of Noah. I'm explaining this to them. And we have from the second day, the second month, and I tell them that Hodesh means renewal, that it doesn't mean lunation. And I went into that, and I also, which I can give you the details on that. Well, I should. Okay, I'll just keep on and try to keep it together. Okay, from the 17th day of the second month to the 17th day of the 7th month, the Genesis says is 5 months. So that's 150 days. And we don't have any 29-day months. I mean, there's no evidence that the moon has ever been 30 days in a row for 5 months in a row. any of the people that I talk to that have been watching the moon, they know that it alternates. The most we've ever found it is 3 months in a row being the same, whether 30 days or 29 days. So then I said to them, this one gentleman that I was talking to today, I said, and I said that that lunation is a good word, but this is the first definition of Chodesh. And a lot of us, we know the first law of first mention. And this guy is in his 70s, and we've been in association for 20 years probably. And so then I said, yeah, we've heard the traditions of men. We've heard that in 700 BC, that something happened in the heavens, and then the 360-day year calendars went to 365. One way or another, around the whole world, like I don't remember how many civilizations. And I always thought, well, something happened to the moon, because moon meant, because it used to be a 360-day year with 30 days a month. Actually, he's the one that brought that up. So then when I started reading in the book of Enoch and the book of Jubilees, I learned that the seasonal divider days were not to be counted in the year, and that the 360-day year was the way it was to be counted. And so all of these sons of Noah were there when the languages were confounded, and Babel, they were scattered from Babel, and so they all kept a 360-day year until they were so far down from their father Noah, and they had these other gods having them getting into the lunar cycle for their timing and everything, for their sacred time. That that makes sense to me. That makes sense just as easily as the other. In fact, the other is a tradition of men, but this is where the Father gave to Enoch, the Father gave to Moses how this was supposed to happen, and that explains the 360-day year. And boy, was he listening. He said, well, okay. But, and there was another one that I was talking to today on that too. It's just people can handle so much at a time. Then, now I forgot what the other one was. Okay, so, but that's the law of first mention with Chodesh. And, and I was explaining to him about how our Savior referred to subjects that I thought were new, but were actually, they're not in the canon we have, but were in the book of Enoch or the book of Jubilees. And I shared with them about how Onias the third went into exile because the Seleucids said you have to use a lunar calendar in your temple. And he said no, and he went into exile. And his second son, Jason, said, oh yeah, okay, we'll do that. And his oldest son, Onias the fourth, didn't do that and talked with the Pharaoh of Egypt and and he received a place where the people who believed the way he did could go. And, just as a father gives me like details that might interest this one or that one or whatever, so that they understand. And then I told them about Beth Bara, and I told them that there were 2 calendars being observed in the land of Judea, not just one, not just the lunar calendar. That was the temple calendar that we believed in. And then I started sharing with them about the about how they weren't what I thought they were up there, the Essenes, crazy people. I said that the way they translated the Dead Sea Scrolls was to cause problems for us. I said, I thought that was crazy that they're out there in the desert and they're worshiping the sun and they're waiting until a Gregorian Wednesday to start their year and on the fourth day. And how does that work? Because I know, and they know, because they've been listening to my history and research, that Saturn's day wasn't the seventh day of an uninterrupted cycling week. That they would have been waiting until the lunar cycle lined up. But he told him that the sun and the stars were supposed to be used. I said the whole thing didn't make any sense. And now it does, because it's not the way they're interpreting it. And we're going in and digging deeply. And the first one that called me said, well, and he called after we were on the call. He said, I really appreciate your research because you research things thoroughly. And so I'm going to be sending him the update on history taking up the Sabbath challenge, which I told him is still in draft form. And that way he'll have all the references that he was looking for. And just please keep praying. This elder man, his name is Dan. He's really precious. And another brother, Gary, called, and his sister called. And he said, okay, fellowship is with your people, Abba. Today, even though I keep getting interrupted from this call. And thank you for letting me share. Now, is that enough, or do I need to think more on this?
Oh, that's
Katrina?
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah, it was awesome, and that's exactly what we talked about earlier: the temple and land of Onias.
Yeah, we were just talking about it. Yeah.
How it fulfills Isaiah 19. Yeah.
So the Spirit was fellowshipping with us even though we were on different calls. Hallelujah.
How awesome. Oh,
Yeah, literally, the temple of Onias is the fulfillment of Isaiah 19. The temple in Egypt set up to Yahuah.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And I had to stop at a certain point because he had to get off. But the other one that called, I finally told him, listen, I appreciate discussing things with you. I got to go now because he was just going circles. And, when it's going over their head and they're going circles, then you just pray for the Father to open up that what you've said, the seeds have been planted, and that maybe the more will be registering by the next time you talk to him.
Yeah, absolutely.
You said the temple of Onias was the fulfillment of, did you say Ezekiel or Isaiah 19? I forget.
It's Isaiah.
It was Isaiah.
Yeah, Isaiah 19. You have it in your writing there, Katrina. Let's see, where is it? It's up here somewhere. Oh, up here, yeah. So, yeah, Isaiah 19, 18 through 22. I'll reply to it. Yeah, Isaiah 19, 18 through 22. That's the temple of Onias right there.
Yeah, I was just making a post, how many now know about the temple of Onias? And I just put in the scripture, the fulfillment of Isaiah. Thank you very much. Just to put in those sparks, plant those seeds. It's our job.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love my job.
And that's what we
Frustrating.
see. We see Jackson. He knows all about the temple of Onias, But when I brought up, how Messiah went to Egypt to the temple of Onias when fleeing from Herod, he was like, wow, I never even thought about that. I didn't put that together.
Yeah, that
But
was cool.
yeah, amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really cool. Yeah. So no emails. He's just gonna come on tonight at 8 for another expo.
I think he
Yeah.
may come on because he usually sends an email out saying, "Oh, we're having our calendar expo with such and such."
Mhm.
But
Okay.
he
That's
didn't.
not with us. That's with somebody else, right?
Yeah, that'll be with somebody else.
No, we're taking a
So,
break for a minute. He's got to digest the stuff that he has.
and speaking of that, there's only about an hour and a half until that starts with Jackson Snyder. And again, it's not our presentation; it's someone else. He didn't even mention who. And that's if he's having it tonight, because, like I said, he didn't even send an email. So we'll see. But yeah, we're gonna go over the Temple of Onias next fellowship. Actually, I'm gonna get some stuff gathered about it this week, and then we'll just dive into detail about it because not a lot of people really know about it, and I think it's very important.
A great presentation.
What's that again? Sorry. Lisa, did you want to say something?
I'm sorry. I didn't know my microphone was on. Nope. That's my husband talking. Sorry.
No, no worries. No worries.
Okay.
So yeah, we got about an hour and a half or so. Well, actually, less, hour and 20 minutes. Well, not we, but that's when Jackson's going to be having his secret special guest.
Jeremy, are you sharing the link, the Zoom link for that? Or, I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention.
uh, it's
Mhm.
going to be that same Zoom,
Okay, the same one.
but
Okay.
yeah, just the same one. Yeah,
Okay. Perfect.
and it's not our presentation. It's someone else.
Right.
But
Okay.
yeah,
All right. Good. Are you all
Katrina.
planning on going?
Yeah, I was thinking about listening in, seeing who it was, and
Mm-hmm.
asking questions, things like that. I know Katrina wanted to ask questions.
Yeah, I'd like to listen in.
I think her phone died or something because she's not in chat anymore. So yeah, it should be interesting. We'll see how it goes. Oh, there's Katrina. She's back.
Oh, sorry about that. I had to call to see where Claudia was, where I could pick her up at,
Oh, no worries. No worries.
or have him drop her off. So, um, what was that?
Oh, we were talking about probably jumping on Snyder's Zoom if he has it.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Even though it's
yeah.
not
I'll do it.
yeah.
Yeah, it's not ours. Yeah.
So that's in like an hour and 20 minutes or so. But yeah, definitely a good discussion today. And yeah, does anybody else have any questions or topics or whatever? Feel free. And yeah, I'll get all that stuff for the Temple of Onias together this week, and we'll talk about it in detail next fellowship. If not, we could probably end it here for today, and then I can get the Zoom for Jackson Snyder again. Post it here in chat if anybody wants to join.
Yeah, if you could repost it, Jeremy, because we would have to scroll back quite far to find it.
Yeah, I had it pinned, but it keeps getting unpinned for some reason. Let's see. Can I find it? I was scrolling back in the links to see if I could find it, but I think that it's too far back. Oh wait, no, here it is. I found it. There it is. So I'm actually going to
Thank you.
yeah, I'm gonna put this in this link section in our other group as well. So in our second group there. But yeah, so he may or may not be having it tonight. As far as I know, he's having it. He hasn't sent an email. So if there's no host and you try to join later, that's probably why. And I know next weekend we're supposed to have ours as well. July 6th. We have our part 4.
Now, when you have the part 4, is it for just him only, or is he going to have some of his people on there? It's just for him, right?
No, it's going to be another public one. It's part of the calendar expo thing.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, whoever can join will be there.
So do you know what you're presenting yet?
I think we're just going to take it by ear because he's the one that invited us back for that because he wanted to hear more about it and perhaps present more about it. So I don't know, maybe.
Abominable day.
Good
That spiel.
Wait, what's that?
Miranda's abominable day. Right up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be
Yeah.
great.
That definitely will not take an hour though, guys.
No, yeah.
But hopefully we'll get more, questions turning and because I think it helps show how off the Gregorian is.
Yeah, maybe we should do that. It's like write up a list of questions like, hey, we don't see adding 7 days or any intercalation in scriptures. We don't see Wednesday, which didn't exist at the time, even line up to day 4 perpetually forever. Like maybe we should just think of questions like that.
Right. When was a numbered day ever lined up with a named day?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Now you're going to have a problem with saying that it didn't exist, because in history, Saturn's day definitely was noted by Roman historians.
Yeah. No, I meant Wednesday.
No, what I'm saying is this: that pagan planetary week was in existence during the time of our Messiah. It simply was not determined the same way it is now.
No,
Just
it
for
went by.
clarity, because all of these people, they come and they say, well, Saturday was always the seventh day of the week. Somebody was talking to me today about, come on, that guy that does the identity thing. What's his name? It's Jim Staley. Yeah, he got a hold of me and he said, listen, Jim Staley is teaching that Saturn's day has always been the seventh day, and where's the history showing that it's not? Because I've done this for a long time, and so I was working with him on that, but historians do say it, and that's why people get it all mixed up. So
Exactly.
because they think it's the same. Yeah, there was a Wednesday, there was a Saturday, but it wasn't determined the same way as it is now.
It was actually, in the beginning, it was on that, what do you call it? Like a lunar cycle week where it basically like floats around because they were going off the lunar cycle as well as the Pharisees. So that's how it was able to line up like that.
Right, and most people aren't aware of that. They take it real simple. And this man was saying to me, he said, you know something? He said, that sounds very complicated and we need to reach people with the simple. And I said, you know something? If the Father's teaching me calendation, he will bring it how to share it in a more simple way. He said, I believe that with you. I believe that. So I said, please keep praying that, because he's teaching me about this, and it's not the way that we've been taught it is. So anyway, we'll see what happens. Abba loves us. I believe this too, very firmly, that when people are being true to what they understand, that he will open things up to them in his time and way, that it's different, and that he has people where he has them until he shows them different. And then, like, I've got connections with a lot of people that I've gotten to know over 20 years, and they're getting a hold of me and asking me about, well, what about this? Because of the relationship that we've had over time. And so they're willing to consider this, where if it was just some nutcase in a bathrobe cussing, they wouldn't even consider it.
We're in a bathrobe cussing and screaming and yelling. It would be different. Wait, no,
But
no,
I
it's
mean, I
true.
believe that he gives us bonds and connections with people, and he's got his perfect timing with everybody and everything. Looks like Eva has a question.
I was actually just about to answer that. So, if you like as well, I'll explain it right now, but I go into greater detail in my article here. And it's the chapter about halfway through, and it's labeled, When Does the Day Begin? And as soon as my phone loads up here, sorry, my phone gets really hot and really slow. It doesn't like to work. So anyways, so the day begins as soon as the bottom of the sun's disk has broken the horizon at sunrise. And we see that from Genesis 1:1-5, where it's speaking about how the light coming to be was starting the counting of the days. So when that light came to be, it wasn't a blending of light. It was full on light, like as it should be. So what we're seeing there is the full amount of light is what's going to begin the day. And then it continues on to have evening and then the morning. So what we're going to see is the blending, which is dusk. You know, in the evening, the sun setting, there's that blending, and then it goes to the darkness. And then we see the morning, which is the blending after the darkness. And so what we're basically seeing is 4 parts in a scriptural cycle of day and night. So it's going to be the light, the blendings, the darkness. So we got the light, the 2 blendings, and the darkness. Sorry. So, sorry, I'm getting the link here. My phone is just. Oh, sorry, my phone knocked me out. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. All right. So here, let me quickly share my link. And then, so the chapter in there is going to be labeled When a Day Begins. So basically, so Genesis 1, it's actually 3 through 5. We're going to see the light starting the counting of days, full light, the 2 blendings, and the darkness. So what that's going to give us is 4 parts of a biblical, cycle of day and night. We see what's written about days, especially, like your question, the Sabbath day. It's the Sabbath Yom, meaning the light part of the day, because Yahuah does all his work in the light. And we're also going to see is these darknesses is what's separating the days. So it's what's keeping the set apart Kodesh days, keeps them separate from the unclean days or normal days. It's that separation again that we see, the same for the seasons, the separation of the seasons, separation of day and night, which separates the holy from the unclean. So what we see is the day begins at sunrise and it ends at sunset. Since Sabbath is Sabbath day, meaning Sabbath Yom, it's the light part of the day. And to keep the set apart Sabbath day from being profaned by touching the unclean days before and after, there has to be that separation, which is the darkness. So the darkness, so basically to put it for an example, or to have an example, so day 1, we'll have the light starts the day, then the sun sets, and then we have night 1. And then we have the morning, which is still part of that whole entire, first day. Then the light comes to be, signaling the start of the second day. Then the sun sets. Then we have the darkness. So that would be day 2 and night 2. So that night is still part of that day. It's just separating the days from each other. Does that make sense? And then in my article there, I have scriptures walking through it all, giving scriptural examples of, we know it as a 12-hour day. And that's where we see Messiah saying, are there not 12 hours in the day? And even though technically, depending on what season you're in, there's going to be more or less than 12 hours in a day. But for the gist of it, on average, we have half light, half dark. And so through these scriptures that I walk through, I think it's Judges in there, but it walks through, it literally walks through each part of the day. It'll show, the light part showing that that's part of a day, and then the blendings come showing that day has ended, but it's in that night, showing the separation of the days. And then the next morning, meaning the next day, showing that the next day had started again. So it's basically these 12-hour increments, I guess you could say, or by Enochian time, 18 parts, which would be 9 parts day or 9 parts night. Of course, varying on what time season. Sorry, I'm rambling on a bit, but
No, that
this,
was really good, Jeremy. Very good explanation of it.
thank you. It's really, so it's just the light from sunrise to sunset, and then the nights will separate the days, even though that night will still be part of that day prior. And I know some people get upset and they're like, well, it's supposed to be a full 24 hours and things like that. Well, not necessarily, because it does not specifically say that. It does specifically say things that should be, like a 24-hour event, like the Day of Atonement, which begins the evening of the 9th, then ends the evening of the 10th. That's showing like a full 24-hour period. And that's the thing too, if your day starts in the evening, your Day of Atonement would then go 2 days if you're starting your days in the evening, because it says you start the evening of the 9th. Well, when is that technically if you're starting your day in the evening?
Right. And when we see certain distinctions in scripture, like when Yahusha was wandering for 40 days and 40 nights, you see the distinction between the two. Because if he said, rest on the Sabbath day, if it was to include the night, he would say rest on the Sabbath day and night, in my opinion.
Exactly. And also we have to remember, they didn't work overnight back then either. They didn't have, night shift jobs like we do today.
He
The
made a
only thing,
covenant with the day and a covenant with the night. And one thing that gets confusion is it does say that there's day that he called the light day and the darkness he called night. And then there was evening, and then there was evening, and it went through night, and that was day one. And I've always explained it. Well, that was the date, because day is light. Other date for the day. If that makes a distinction. So that way, whenever people are saying, oh, well, they were traveling during the Sabbath because it says that they arrived on such and such a date. And it's like, well, not necessarily. It said that the cloud lifted day or night. So we can't, there's nothing showing that they actually traveled on a Sabbath day by using those dates.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that's actually more evidence to show, because they travel by night during that time. So the Sabbath would have already been ended and it would have been free to travel. And yeah, it really goes pretty deep. And it took me a long time of studying to actually figure it out and get it down. And there was a point in time where I was observing the Sabbath from sundown Friday to sunup Sunday because I had no idea and I just wanted to be safe. Then, digging into it, fasting, praying. That's when the Father, he showed me all these verses, and he showed me that, look, there's a separation, and it's to keep the holy from touching the profane. And that's what we see in Jubilees as well, an abominable day. People making the holy days come on abominable days. Well, not every day that's not holy is abominable. There are abominable days, like Miranda has found. Like the what was it, the 17th of the second month or something? It was the same
Yeah.
day. Yeah, the same day the serpent tempted Eve. It's a abominable day. Days that don't have anything special, they're just a regular, normal day. I don't know if those are abominable or not, but they're not set apart or holy or anything like that. So, if they're not that, then what are they? They would have to be, unclean. So this is why
Right.
we have that separation.
And I don't think it's a coincidence that we also don't have any feast days during the winter months, right? We only have the head of the season to signify the changing from autumn to winter. But we don't have any significant uh, feast days. And like I said, I don't think that's a coincidence because that's the time when it's dark, cold, everything's dead, you know?
Precisely. Yeah, and it makes sense as to why.
That's the time when the night has more hours than the day.
Darkness is basically ruling that time.
Right. And we're not children of the night.
Unless you're in Australia or New Zealand or South Africa or South America, then then I suppose, it'd be winter when we're celebrating our, majority of the festivals. Very interesting that.
Right. And I imagine that people who are down there might, some of them I think have decided to flip it. Not that they wouldn't associate with us during our time as well, but because they're harvest feasts, that they're doing it during their harvest times.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that a bit. And, we see it was Yahuah's set times that he said at a certain time. So if they do it opposite, then they're actually doing opposite of Yahuah's time. So even though they're in the South, they would still have to observe the same festivals at their appointed time. And I think Jermaine, yeah, she mentioned it earlier, Australia and all these southern countries are really more, they've been settled in modern times more than they have been, in ancient times. Because we see, basically most of civilization was above the equator in the north for the majority of the time. Yeah, there was some below it as well, but it was mostly above it. So I think that's why Yahuwah chose that time. And I believe before the flood, all the earth was just, basically a tropical rainforest. That's why we see the dew that was coming up to water the plants, like that mist or the fog. And that's what we see in the rainforest, where it's not clouds or anything making it rain. It's the plants and trees themselves that make it rain. And it wasn't until the flood came that then the rain started coming from the clouds because the windows of heaven opened up and the fountains of the deep. And that's what created our oceans as we know them today. Because while there was large bodies of water back then, it was nothing like our oceans. And it was when the flood came, it flooded everything out. So we still have that remnant of the ocean because some of those vents of the deep are still open today. And that's what we see, spewing out all the salt and salinity that we get in our oceans.
The hyperthermal
Yeah.
I'm totally butchering it right now, but you know what I'm saying.
And it's piping out hot water too. They said it's pretty hot.
Like hot water coming out into freezing cold ocean water.
Yes.
And that's where fish and animals, that live there, they go and warm up by these vents. And all these vents are located on these quote unquote fault lines.
Yeah. Yep.
That are quote unquote all lead to the north like rivers. Why? Because I believe they're the rivers of Eden originally.
I think, if I remember correctly, that's what God culture teaches.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. I still feel like I question that one.
I don't know. It makes sense.
It does. It really does. I don't agree all of with God culture, of course,
Same
but
here. Yeah. But he does have some really good studies, though. And like I said, praise Yah, he's done a beautiful job in testing the hidden books.
Exactly. And so Ellie, the first fruits, I don't think they're a high Sabbath. They're just like a memorial thing to be observed. Because we don't see that in like the scrolls either. Because we see like Shavuot, it is a high Sabbath. But then the new wine and the new oil, we don't see that they are a high Sabbath. They could be. And that was the same with so the 4 seasonal heads of months. We were in that same position. Like we didn't know if they were high Sabbaths or just regular days. And it wasn't until, digging into Ha Hodesh and then seeing those verses, all of those verses really, but mostly the ones in Isaiah and Amos and really 1 Samuel 20, they all show the importance of these 4 seasonal heads of month days and how they were treated like Sabbath days. Even though the scribes, lying pens of the scribes did their best to, try to omit these things, those clues are still there. And we see in the Dead Sea Scrolls they were labeled as important days as well. But
Yeah, Jeremy, I'm excited to hear about the study about the more of the Temple of Onias. So really looking forward to that next week.
Same here.
Yeah, and thank you for responding to my question.
No problem.
The one thing that caused me to question is because for years, I went into Deuteronomy and into Leviticus, and I found that they mistranslated the count. And they can X50, and I figured that out by being in that anymore. That's what I was wondering.
Ellie, you're cutting out, sweetie. You're cutting out.
Okay. So I found in the Hebrew that that it's supposed to be in space or in time in Leviticus 23. And they translated it according to space rather than time. In time, you were supposed to add another 50 days. So that's an aspect of this picture that causes me to wonder if if they left out this, that it was just simply every 7 weeks they had a harvest festival. And the corn, the wine, and the oil, if that would have been set aside Sabbaths as well. But that's that's just from thoughts that I had.
Yeah. And no, we're definitely not throwing it out that they possibly could be, because we see Shavuot is one, so why wouldn't the other ones be?
Right.
And
We see in Nehemiah, I think it was that they came with the first fruits of the corn and the wine and the oil. And
yeah,
why wouldn't they hang around and have a special day, right?
that's my thoughts for sure. We
Can't
need to
prove
find
it,
some more.
but we can sure do it.
Yeah, that's the thing too, is that if we say they're Sabbaths, but we can't show anywhere that they are, people are going to be like, oh, well, now you're adding things. So, we're not tossing out that they could be a Sabbath, and we're not saying as of yet that they are because we haven't confirmed it, but it's a very high possibility that they absolutely are. We just need to get more evidence to support that, And that just like with the 4 seasonal header days, it was the same stance, and then we found more evidence about that. So that's when we're like, okay, yeah, these are definitely, high Sabbaths, like a Sabbath day. So once we get that same information for these other festivals, boom, that'll be it right there. Yeah, great fellowship as usual. And there's about 45 minutes until Jackson has his other exposee coming on, person coming on to present their calendar. So we might end it here if nobody else has any more questions or anything they want to bring up.
All right, well, I'll say goodbye and Shabbat Shalom. I'm going to feed my family. Dinner's almost ready. And then maybe I'll jump in on the Zoom.
Sounds good. Awesome. Shabbat Shalom, sister. Thank you for joining.
Good night, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. And yeah, the Zoom link's there in the chat. I'll reply to it here. So if you wanna
Shabbat Shalom!
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
So yeah, thank you all for joining.
Bye, cousin Lisa.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for joining.
Shalom, everyone.
Much love to each and every one of you.
Same to you, brother. And thank you guys again for a wonderful fellowship. It's just been such a blessing all these months.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Thank you all.
We're all family.
Yes, we are. Definitely an answer to prayer from many years ago.
Absolutely. But yeah, so we'll see you all on the Zoom later on. And again, it's not our presentation, it'll be somebody else's, but we're just there to listen in and ask questions.
Sounds good.
Awesome. So Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Have a blessed rest of your days or evenings. And we will meet same time, same place next weekend as well. And we'll discuss the Temple of Onias.